Hello, beautiful friends and fellow word lovers. My name is Olivia. Welcome back to my channel, Pocket of Poetry. Today's video is just going to be my August wrap up. So I'm just going to be going through the books I read in August. So honestly, with my wrap ups, I've gotten to the point where I don't really expect people to watch them because I kind of just do them for myself to like catalog what I've read in the year. But it's been, today is actually September 9th, so I was planning to have this video filmed way before this point, but I got sick. If you couldn't tell by my voice, and I'm sure you can, I've been really sick for the past couple of days, and today I finally felt somewhat more like human again, so I decided to take the opportunity to film this before it got way too late in the month. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump into the books. Please forgive my voice for sounding so gross, but we're going to jump into it. So August, I read a total of 5 books. Yeah, I read a total of 5 books to completion in August, so it wasn't like a terrible reading month, I guess. The first book that I read was What Alice Forgot by Liane Moriarty. I went through a phase last summer where I was super obsessed with Liane Moriarty's books. I kind of discovered her last year and just was super obsessed. I read Big Little Lies, 9 Perfect Strangers. Overall, my rating for What Alice Forgot was 4 stars. I actually loved it. It might be one of my favorite Liane Moriarty books. It's definitely one of her least dark books. Like, I feel like her other books tend to have a lot more like dark sort of mystery elements to them, and this book honestly didn't really have any of that. Basically, we follow our main character Alice, who's 39 years old when she falls at the gym and hits her head so hard that she forgets the last 10 years of her life. So when she wakes up, she thinks she's 29. She thinks she's happily married and expecting her first child, when she's actually on the brink of divorce and she has 3 kids. And so it goes through to kind of explain what happens from there. It was just super interesting commentary on how much a person's life can change in the span of a decade and how much a person themselves can change, because Alice at 39 was a very different person than Alice at 29 was. It really made me ponder on like what kind of a person I'm going to be 10 years from now. Like, what will I be like? How much will I have changed by then? How much will my life have changed? And it was an interesting commentary also on like relationships and marriages and kind of how they can go wrong, because she did she was super happily married at 29, and when she wakes up she thinks she's in this happy marriage, but finding out she's actually on the brink of divorce is like super devastating. And she sort of slowly discovers what went wrong, and you slowly over the course of the novel different things are revealed to you until at the end kind of everything makes sense. And so it was a really, really interesting book. I really enjoyed it and would definitely recommend it, especially if you like Liane Moriarty. But it was really sweet and cute, and I loved Alice's character. I thought she was so much fun, and so she was very spunky and very like quirky, I guess is the best word, but I thought she was a really fun character. The next book that I read was A Poisoned Season by Tasha Alexander. This is the sequel to And Only to Deceive, which I read in July. I really liked the sequel. I thought it was so much fun. The romance plot is continued. We still have Emily Ashton as she is navigating being a widow in the Linden Society, and Colin Hargreaves is trying to court her, convince her to marry him, and she's kind of like not sure about marriage. Then we have this whole mystery plot that happens where someone is stealing things that once belonged to Marie Antoinette. There's this like practiced jewel thief, and so you get kind of this creepy sense throughout the book of like the mystery, and I was definitely very surprised by how it ended. Didn't see the ending coming, so I'm gonna rate this one 4.5 stars, which is what I gave the first book. I feel like I enjoyed them both pretty much equally, so I decided to give them an equal rating. The next book that I'm going to be talking about in my wrap up, I don't actually remember when I finished this book. I can't remember if it was in July or August, but either way, I did not talk about it in the July wrap up, and it's Rule of Wolves by Lee Bardugo. My husband and I finished this book together. We read all of the Grishaverse books together this year. I guess we started last year, finished this year. And this one was okay. I don't know. I can't say anything else about it. I would probably give it a solid 3-star rating. It was just like, that's how I felt about King of Scars too. Like, I don't know, this series just isn't as good as the other series, especially the Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom duology. Um, these ones just, they kind of fell a little bit flat. Like, I mean, you're excited to see these characters and see kind of like where everything goes for them, but then it ends up being like, I don't know. I feel like I was watching Cindy's channel review on this book, and she was saying that there's like too many POV characters. I totally agree with that. Like, I think that kind of is the problem with this book. It was just spread out over too many characters and too many things were happening, and like she managed to wrap it all up in the end, but I feel like it would have been so much better if it was more focused on the characters that we actually cared about, like Zoya and Nikolai, and focusing on their stories more and going more in depth instead of like spreading it out all over the place. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. I really don't want to talk on this too much because I just feel like so many people have mentioned these books already, and I actually don't think I ever mentioned King of Scars in any of my wrap-ups. I was going back through them this morning and watching them, and I don't think I ever mentioned King of Scars, but I also think I gave King of Scars like a 3.5 rating, so there's my 2 cents on that. So then I went to the library after I finished those first 2 books and kind of like was in a reading slump again, so I was like, oh, maybe I'll pick up another Cassandra Clare book, because my original plan was to wait until September to start the Last Hours books, but then I was like, maybe I'll start those in August instead. But then when I went to the library, I decided to pick up Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy and Ghosts of the Shadow Market. Originally I was just going to read Ghosts of the Shadow Market because there was like a story in there in specific that I wanted to read, but then I saw Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy, which, if you don't know, both of these books are standalones in the Shadowhunter universe that kind of combine like storylines and timelines from all the different series characters, and kind of just give you different stories. So Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy centers around Simon from the Mortal Instruments. After that Mortal Instruments ends, he gets his memories wiped and he goes to the Shadowhunter Academy to train to become a Shadowhunter, and it kind of follows his experiences there and also does some flashbacks to different characters' stories in the past. I did find it an interesting read. I did end up finishing it. It was all right. I would give it about a 3-star rating. I thought it was entertaining for sure. There were some really fun moments in there. I did really like the flashback stories. Those were probably my favorite parts. But overall it got a little bit repetitive, a little bit annoying, as I thought it would. Like, honestly, I wasn't originally planning on reading it, but then on a whim I just kind of picked it up, and it was okay. Like, I don't regret reading it. It was an alright book, but again, I would rate it about 3 stars. And then I started reading Ghosts of the Shadow Market, and I did not finish it because I just got kind of bored, because I was like, these stories, I don't know, they were all just like random stories that were not really related to each other in any way, and I don't know, I just got kind of bored with it. Didn't really want to keep reading, because there were certain stories that I was interested in, certain ones that I wasn't, but I just didn't want to like comb through to find the ones that I was interested in, so I just DNF'd it. So there is that. And then before I mention the last book that I read, I know I kind of went through these a lot faster than I normally do. I just don't feel like I have that much to say about most of these books. Like, those first 2 books, I really enjoyed them. The rest I don't really feel like I have a whole lot to say on. However, I did read Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This is the one and only book that I purchased in August. And confession time, I didn't actually finish it. This is how far I made it in. So I made it pretty far. I was super close to being done. The reason that I picked this book up and read it initially was because I was going to participate in the Jane Austen read-a-thon on Kiera Foster's channel. She's going to do a Jane Austen book a month every month, starting in August and ending in January, and I was totally going to participate. I was so excited. I was going to buy a Jane Austen book every month so I could have the full collection edition of all the books. Then when I started reading Sense and Sensibility, I was so bored. So bored. I don't think I have been this bored reading a book in a very, very long time. And the sad thing is, like, I was really excited to read Jane Austen. I was expecting to really enjoy it and have fun with it. But this book, and I don't know if it's just this book in particular, I don't know if I should go on and try to give the other books a chance, but Sense and Sensibility, oh my gosh, I was like dragging myself through it. Like, page by page, chapter by chapter. Like, I was just trying to force myself to get through it. And I was like, if I can just finish it in August, and I had this deadline, August 31st, as long as I finish it by August 31st. Well, August 31st came and went, and I still had this much left. And now I'm just completely unmotivated to finish it. Because here's the thing, I already know what happens. I already know how it ends. I know the story. I've known it for a long time. Like, I read this book a long time ago when I was younger. So I know what happens. I find the entire book to be super boring. I don't really connect with the characters that much. I honestly thought I was going to enjoy it a lot more than I ended up enjoying it. But I was so bored, you guys. So bored. I didn't even want to join the live discussion. Like, that's how bored I was. Like, I tried watching the movie to see if that would get me more into it, and like, while I did enjoy the movie somewhat, it was a good movie, just didn't help. I just could not get myself through this book. So I'm not really sure if I'm going to participate in the rest of the readathon, because I'm so uninspired after reading this. It really killed my desire to read Jane Austen. So yeah, I wanted to mention it in my wrap up because I did finish most of it, and again, I do know the entire story, so I feel like I am justified, or I guess qualified is the word I'm looking for. I feel like I am qualified to speak on it because I do know the entire story and I read almost all of it. But yeah, I didn't quite finish it, but you guys, it was so hard to get through. I can't even emphasize how hard it was to get through. I was literally forcing myself, and it's like, if I have to force myself to read, why am I even doing it? Like, I should be enjoying this. So those are my thoughts on that. I'm really sad about it because I was hoping to like get at least a little bit more than I did, but it is what it is. Okay, the last book that I want to talk about, I did finish this book a couple of weeks ago, but it was the last book that I actually finished in August, weird as that is to say. But it was The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. You guys know I discovered Donna Tartt this year. I discovered her books. I read The Secret History first, then I read The Goldfinch, and I absolutely fell in love with her writing and her as an author. Like, I just am beyond obsessed with her. And so I really wanted to read her other book. She only has ever written 3 books, and The Little Friend was the only one that I hadn't read. So I really wanted to read it because it's not as popular or talked about as her other 2 books are, so I was just really curious to see what kind of a reading experience it would be. And let me tell you, I am so glad that I read it. I actually checked it out on Libby on my library, so I don't have a physical copy of it, but I kind of want to purchase one because it was actually such an fascinating reading experience. Like, it was so different from her other books. It definitely had that Donna Tartt lush description and aesthetic and just atmospheric feeling to it that her other books have, but it was very, very different both in premise and in format than her other 2 books are. Secret History and The Goldfinch are very connected to each other in that they are both somewhat similarly told stories. They're both first-person narratives told by a dude, basically told by a guy in his 20s who's pretty privileged, living in a somewhat more wealthy world. And this book was entirely different. It was told from the perspective, well, first of all, it wasn't told from a first-person perspective. It was actually told from an omniscient perspective, which I found fascinating. Donna Tartt doing omniscient is actually so incredible, so good. She did it in such a way that she would actually bounce from one character's mind to another, literally mid-scene, and sometimes it got a little bit like jarring and startling, but I loved every second of it, you guys. Like, I honestly, Donna Tartt could write anything and I would probably read it and rave over it, but this was like just reading something from her that was in an omniscient perspective was so interesting because I've never seen her do anything other than a first person where you're so entrenched in this one person's view and perspective and you're seeing everything through that lens. But in this one, we were seeing everyone's perspective, and it was so interesting because you are getting the perspective of this 12-year-old little girl named Harriet, who was our main character. She was living in a town in the south in Mississippi, I believe in like the 1970s, and she has a really unique home life and situation. It starts out 12 years earlier when Harriet was a baby, and her older brother Robin, who was 9 at the time, was murdered in the family's front yard, and nobody except for her and her sister Allison, who was 4 at the time, witnessed the murder. And so nobody knows what happened except for technically them, even though Allison claims to not remember it, and Harriet was obviously a baby at the time. And so nobody knows what happened, and he was found hung from a tree, but nobody knows who did it or how. And anyway, so the story follows Harriet when she is 12, and her sort of world and her perspective. And then we also follow this other character, Danny Ratliff, who Harriet becomes convinced is the murderer of her brother and becomes determined to exact revenge on him. And we also get a bunch of other characters' perspectives as well. We get Harriet's little childhood friend. We get her childhood friend's older brother. We get the older brother of Danny Ratliff. We get multiple different perspectives. Harriet also has a bunch of her grandmother and a bunch of great aunts who kind of have raised her as a community, because her father and mother are both very absent in her life. And they're super interesting characters. Basically, we just have this super intriguing, interesting cast of characters. And the book is dark, it's gloomy, it's melodramatic. It has this air and quality to it of just like darkness and despair that kind of just permeates everything like a thick fog. And it's just so fascinating. Like, if you like Donna Tartt, I just think you should read this book. It's so good. Like, I actually wrote down a bunch of quotes, and I don't have them with me because they're at work. And I'm currently quarantining. But there's these quotes in the book that just, I wrote them down because I love them so much. I love her writing. I love how she describes things. She described women's voices who were gossiping as having a shrieking, bright vivacity. She describes, she just describes things in such a creepy, gloomy way, and I love it so much. Anyway, I've ranted for way too long, but I did give The Little Friend 5 stars, just like I gave The Goldfinch and Secret History 5 stars. The Goldfinch is still my favorite out of the three. I still connected to that one on probably the deepest level, and I'm actually rereading it, you guys. I read it only like 2 months ago in June, but I'm rereading it again because I just love it so much. Anyway, that one's still my favorite, but The Little Friend was really good. Like, I can see why it's her least talked about because the other two are better, but it's definitely a really interesting read if you would like to take the time. Okay, so that is my wrap up for August. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Again, I am going to be posting more on this channel soon, I promise. Life just keeps getting in my way. I'm still recovering from this sickness, but hopefully once I'm recovered, we'll be back at it with more videos. We'll be talking about writing, and hopefully we'll be talking about some books as well. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you feel like it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.